existing.
Yeah, I mean that's always an edge. Existing is likely an advantage over something that doesn't exist.
Uh,
Wow, this is an insightful episode already.
Well, fingers crossed. If we play our cards right in a week, the Republican Party will no longer exist. I mean, I know that's extraordinarily hopeful and unlikely, but it's a possibility.
I got my 2 vape pens just tied together.
what is that? Hold on, let me see.
I was just both of my vape pens. I've just tied them together
Ooh.
to have my indica and sativa together. Also because it's harder to lose this way.
Oh, I see.
Because it's not as small.
All right, I'm good to go now. And
Okay.
what were you saying about your vape pen and your incredible sex?
Those were separate people. That was her.
No, I know. Just that was for each of you. One for.
Oh,
And
was
I
just
got a
saying,
great.
I tied them
dig down
together.
today, just for the
Good for
record.
you.
Okay, so you got a double
Yes, the
vape
dig
going
down
on
was
there.
real.
Is that what that is?
I just have them tied together so they don't get lost.
Oh, I thought you were smoking both of them at the same time.
I could do
Now
that
that
too.
would be cool if you did that, Carol. That would be.
All right, I've done it.
So, well, don't feel too left out, Ty. Carol also got some incredible sucking going on there. Hey, this is D Knight.
This is Carol.
This is Ty.
And you're listening to the Pardon the Insurrection podcast, where we all understand that Puerto Ricans are Americans, unlike some people in the Republican Party. As per the usual, just it's an utter week of insanity. I mean, I sit here and I think about last week, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right.
It's too much to handle.
A woman accused Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her after she was brought to Trump Tower by Jeffrey Epstein. Incredible. That made no headlines. That was insane. And every single week is like that. There's always some utter insanity that occurs that just the media just refuses to cover. I don't know why it's like that, but that is, well, actually, we'll probably get to why it's like that. Yeah, we'll get to that. But first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who wished me a happy birthday and sent all their love and support last week and over the course of the weekend. I appreciate you guys.
You're 10 years from ARP.
ARP, AARP, whatever it's called.
No, they've been sending me stuff for
forever.
I'm officially a member now.
That's funny. No, they've sent me stuff before, but it's usually, I think it's like car insurance or something. Anyway, so yeah, appreciate you guys. Like, I wouldn't be doing this without you listening and or following me on the internet. All that good stuff. I appreciate everything, all the support, all the kind words, all the thoughts, all the comments all year long, not just on special occasions. You guys make me feel appreciated all the time, and I appreciate you guys back. And of course, we're a week away from the election, so all hell is breaking loose, generally speaking. And, you know, despite whatever your particular flavor of presidential candidate is, I assume if you're listening to this podcast, you're likely voting for Kamala Harris, as am I. Well, as have I already. Early voted.
Unless you just love to get off to hating our voices, in which case. Yeah, sure.
Hey, I'm entirely sure there's a couple of people out there hate listening to this podcast, and kudos to you. Every download counts. But even in a week of insanity, it was kind of awesome to see this from the Kamala Harris campaign. King had a dream that we would find freedom. We can if you believe. You know what time it is? It's for our girl. It's for our country. It's for our people. It's for our freedom. Yeah,
I love that song.
Taking over the Vegas sphere was dope. That was incredible. And yeah, the song is kudos. So, you know, I'm not
the music was added to the video, right? They don't like blast Las Vegas with super loud music all the time.
No, that the Harris campaign put out a video and they dubbed the music.
Right. Sorry, I'm like the poor noise.
So before everyone like tries to lynch me over my Beyonce take, I'm not the biggest Beyonce fan. It's not that I dislike Beyonce. Her music is pretty good. I'm not necessarily a fan of her voice per se. I mean, I feel like Latoya Luckett was probably the best singer in the group, and she got kicked out of the group. So
get that.
Beyonce could
That's
be,
fair.
yeah.
That's
So
fair.
like in terms of like vocal quality, it's probably not even my favorite in Destiny's Child, but she does make dope music. And she's had an extraordinary career. I mean, she is talented. She can sing, she can dance, she can do everything. So kudos to her. But
She's Sasha Fierce. Come on.
well, it's just funny you bring up that song because it's funny. It's Kendrick Lamar's year, and he is probably going to live on forever in two ways because they're the two songs that we're going to hear for the rest of eternity. Yes, the two songs we're going to hear for the rest of eternity have Kendrick Lamar on them. It's one, that Beyonce song "Freedom." We're going to hear that for 100 years, and we're also going to hear "They Not Like Us." They not like that's going to go down in the history books.
I've heard that song played so many different times in so many different venues. But man, come on, that's a banger. It is. He ate that.
He did. As much of a fan as I am of maybe not Drake the person, but Drake the musician, the artist, at least some of his music, it's just quite hilarious that one of the songs that will go down in American history is calling him a pedophile. It's utterly ironic. I mean, just anyway, speaking of pedophiles, Donald Trump held Donald Trump held a rally over the weekend at Madison Square Garden in New York City, which is just an insane sentence a week before election.
Yeah, it's Vanity Fest in a state he can't win.
Yeah, and it went off the rails before it even really got started as a right-wing comedian just totally destroyed himself on the stage and likely ended the possibility
and the Trump campaign, pretty much.
Yeah, he also destroyed the Trump campaign in the process, making some extraordinarily distasteful comments that pissed off what I would imagine to be a lot of voters a week before the election.
A lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting.
Yeah.
Did he get booed?
So he didn't get laughs really. If you heard, it stayed pretty quiet. I think it was a lot of groans. So that was an extraordinarily detrimental comment from that guy. The Trump campaign didn't really distance themselves from the remarks. None of the speakers who proceeded thereafter came out and addressed the comments or.
No, it seems like the campaign's approach is to say like, it was funny. It's a joke. Normal people. I read normal people think this is funny.
Oh, that was Matt Walsh.
Oh, that was the bad Matt Walsh. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Not a fan. So obviously this comment, as terrible as it is surprising that it's made shockwaves throughout the media landscape, and apparently it's trickled its way down to Latino and specifically just brown voters in general, but specifically Puerto Ricans living in America, as a number of them live in swing states. And I believe in all of the swing states, you could even throw Florida into this, more Puerto Ricans live in each of those states than the margin for victory in 2020. Whether that be,
I think it was like 1.1 million live in New York alone.
Yeah, also just
and
coming
like
to their home turf.
500,000 in Pennsylvania, and
outside of Puerto Rico,
Haitians to that group.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But where does Puerto Rico get like one electoral vote?
Yeah, but more importantly than that,
they're the ones in the swing states are going to make a bigger impact.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania in particular has nearly 500,000 Puerto Ricans living there, and that's extraordinarily detrimental to Trump's chances of winning in a week.
Especially since a lot of that Amish vote was made up by Scott Presler.
Yeah, that they found 180,000 Amish in Lancaster County when there's only 22,000 Amish and 92,000 in the entire state.
Yeah, there's less than 100,000 Amish people in the state, and they said they found nearly 200,000.
Scott
Amish
Pressler,
registrations.
this guy who goes around. I thought he was just his screen name is apt. It's the Persistence, and he just goes around registering people to vote. And I was like, damn, I can't fault the guy. I hate him, but I can't fault him. And now because he's just registering people to vote. But apparently there were about 1,500 to 2,500 applications that were suspicious with suspicious names, dates, things that didn't match up. And I saw that my husband's like, who's the guy you were that annoying guy you were talking about? I'm like, Scott Pressler. He's like, oh, he's in the news. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, Scott Pressler is registering voters that don't exist and is likely going to prison. But so back to this Puerto Rico thing, took fire in the community, probably going to cost Trump a couple of swing states, I would imagine. Like, I know people are like, oh, ignore the polls. I mean, the polls have been pretty much saying the same thing over the course of the past month and a half. The election's close. Going into election day, Kamala Harris has the advantage, but it's not going to be an overwhelming, massive victory in swing states. But yeah, kudos to that guy. And like it, well, first of all, he didn't just address Puerto Ricans. He also just said just insanely insensitive shit in general.
I welcome migrants to the United States of America with open arms. And by open arms, I mean like this.
Wah, wah,
It's wild.
wah.
And these Latinos, they love making babies too. Just know that. They do. They do. There's no pulling out. They don't do that. They come inside, just like they did to our country. Republicans are the party with a good sense of humor.
Just
I
incredible.
love the way that joke ended.
Yeah, yeah, I know, right? Incredibly insensitive comments. And I get that he's like a shock jock type comedian. You know, he says he's like a roast guy, and he just kind of comes out and says offensive things. But like,
He's a one-trick pony. Like, he has nothing else except racial humor. And then you saw what he did to Pingang when he was doing the stand-up, and Pingang, the Asian American comedian, had opened for him. And then Hinchcliffe comes on the stage and just starts going on an anti-Asian rant, calling Pingang a chink, and then making a fake Asian accent, I guess what he thought was an Asian accent in his mind. It was vile.
also at the rally, he talked about a guy in the audience. Said he was, I forgot what he said. It looked like he was wearing, but then he talked about him.
His hair,
Lampshade.
that if he was wearing a
Lampshade.
helmet.
Yeah, it sounded. He said it looked like he was wearing a lampshade. Yeah, and then he proceeded to comment on how he hung out with him the previous evening, and they carved watermelons together. Now, I do find it super ironic in some ways that the thing that lit the country on fire and it took off in the media was just the comments about Puerto Ricans. I mean, obviously it was offensive, but like all the other racism just pretty much went under the radar. No one really cared.
And he covered the gamut. Like, he went from Palestinian, like, he started with Puerto Ricans, then going on to Black people,
Latinos,
then with
Palestinians,
and then his anti-Semitism. Like, he covered the gamut. It was an equal opportunity racist set.
Yeah, except for white people. That's the only group of people that he did not go after in any way, shape, form, or fashion.
He didn't talk about no raisins in the tater salad. He didn't talk about no unseasoned chicken. Fuck him.
People in the audience would have been offended.
And then, so a lot of people, especially like comedians themselves, talk about the fact that you have to give them the space to just do their jokes. And I do agree with that. I absolutely believe you should have the space to say whatever you want, especially as a comedian. You get to make whatever kind of jokes you want. You get to tell like, if anything, comedians should be getting as close to the third rail as possible, at least in appropriate venues. The problem here is not only was this stuff not funny, they weren't jokes. There was
Exactly.
there was no joke, there was no setup, there was no real punchline. He's just talking about, I mean, he's basically just saying race is shit. And it's not that it's impossible to make jokes about race. Like, there are jokes that have been fairly racist, but they're also funny. So if it's actually funny, I will give an actual comedian a pass on the racism. Again, like,
If it's funny,
there's a measuring
actual
test.
funny joke.
yes,
Yeah, no.
the
And I
nature
think too,
the nature
there's
of the
something-
joke is
Yeah.
implies some form of racism, but the comedian is not intending to be offensive. It's just making a joke that has some kind of observation about race in America. Totally fine. Comedians do it all the time, especially black comedians. Happens all the time. This shit was not funny. It was not jokes. It was straight up racism. It's probably gonna, I mean, in all likelihood, is gonna cause Trump a swing state.
I mean, this is the same guy who tweeted if anybody wanted to go halfsies on a slave. So
Fair enough. But in case you think we're being ridiculous, we do have comments from other individuals who are not comedians that are just as in line with that nonsense. I mean, it's just as bad. Here's Rudy Giuliani following a similar fashion.
September 11 was our darkest hour. October 7 was Israel's darkest hour. They are our best friend. I worked for Ronald Reagan for 8 years. Ronald Reagan said, we have to be there for Israel always because they are always there for us.
The racism is coming. Just wait.
Hamas is not there for us. Iran is not there for us. They want to kill us. And the Palestinians are taught to kill us at 2 years old. They won't let a Palestinian in Jordan. They won't let a Palestinian in Egypt. And Harris wants to bring them to you. They may have good people. I'm sorry, I don't take a risk with people that are taught to kill Americans at 2.
oh Jesus. How far that man has fallen, I can't.
I mean, you
And,
say
you know,
that.
Maybe good people, but we're not willing
And
to take. He's not
David
willing
is-
to take a risk.
David
Okay.
is still so fucking just I don't
So,
know.
so he's not willing to give. So he's saying, "I'm not willing to give someone the benefit of humanity because of." Okay.
Yeah, and you say how far good people have fallen. I think he was always this. He was always a closeted version of this, and then being out of office, and then the advent of Trump, it just
He has all the time in the world to be this.
yes, it allowed him to show his true colors. But quickly before we move on from that, I just wanted to go back to that joke that the comedian made about
Joke.
Latinos not pulling out. Trump's mom has 10 kids. So
She had 10 kids? Oh, Jesus.
yeah, it's crazy.
I didn't know. Well, Elon Musk has like 12 with 5 baby mamas. So that also in context.
Yeah, he was
one of
also
them at the rally. There was like a little toddler with him at the rally.
it's entirely possible. I
Oh
don't
yeah, he had his son with the "Make America Great Again" hat, and they're like, "Oh my God, Elon's parenting. He's just like us." Like,
He's
you
like,
know,
which one are you? Put on the fucking hat.
it all goes back to Kendrick Lamar. Elon Musk is the very definition of not like us. So in continuing along with the racism, CNN had a guest on who just said some incredibly offensive shit about
Is that when
Mehdi
Mehdi Hassan went ham?
Yeah, well, I'll play the clip for you.
If you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing
You're
it.
called
Stop
an
saying
anti-Semite.
it.
You've
Stop
been called an
saying it.
anti-Semite
Stop
more
saying
than anyone
things.
else's table.
Yeah.
And people would
By
sit there
you.
and, no, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I don't.
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians. I'm used to it. It's
Yeah,
fine.
well, I hope your beeper doesn't go off. The thing is that
you just say I should die?
You
should not.
No, I
Did
said,
you just say
no,
I should be killed?
No, I did not say that. I said, no, I did not say that.
Hold on.
Did your guest just say I
No,
should
I
be
did
killed?
not.
What did
On
you
live
just say?
TV.
I said I hope
Guys,
you don't.
let me just stop.
You said you hope my beeper doesn't go off.
Because you said I'm a big
Stop that
supporter
right
of
now.
Of the Palestinians.
Guys.
Hamas?
Guys,
Oh,
let me
damn.
tell you.
Palestinians.
Are you a supporter
Am I
of
what?
Hamas?
No, of course I'm not.
Palestinians
supporting
are
Hamas.
not-
Then I
Are
apologize.
you a
Then I
racist, violent
apologize.
person?
Then I
inside?
So that comment, if you didn't understand the reference, it was an operation by the Israeli military to weaponize pagers used by Hezbollah in Lebanon, and they read those devices with explosives, and then at a certain time, they had those devices activate the explosives, killing or wounding numerous Hezbollah military officials, which was an extraordinarily successful operation in terms of decapitating Hezbollah's military prowess. Now, again, in all likelihood, I'm sure probably a handful of innocent civilians were probably hurt or wounded in that operation. And that's extraordinarily unfortunate. And just talking about in terms of a military operation to decapitate a terrorist organization, it was effective in that regard. And that guy, I forgot his fucking name. He's kind of a dick. Accusing Mehdi Hassan.
Just call him Dick.
Well, first of all, accusing Mehdi Hassan of being a terrorist and practically saying that he wants to die, that's extraordinarily distasteful and just disgusting and gross. Now, and I say this as a person who quite regularly does not agree with Mehdi Hassan.
Mehdi Hassan, yeah.
Yeah, especially his take on the situation in the Middle East. Not always a fan, not necessarily of the end goal that he wants to get to, but the way in which he approaches it. Typically don't agree with that. But again, these are just disagreements. I don't wish any harm on the dude. I don't think he's a terrorist. Do I think he supports Hamas? Probably not. I mean, his zeal for the defense of Palestinians, it does kind of lead into uncomfortable territory for me personally sometimes, because let's not forget that was a terrorist organization that started a war there. That doesn't get addressed very often. But anyway, that aside, totally disgusting. And again, I would just like to note that, and this isn't a complaint as much as an observation, but the racism against black people from the Trump campaign is just so baked into the equation that when it happens, the media just shrugs its shoulders. And it takes something calling a former MSNBC host the wrong terrorist organization for starters. And then also, a terrible comedian calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage to wake the media up, when in fact, if they were just vigilant about the racism against black people, if they drew the line there, it would never get to these other extremes.
No, you know what, D? You saying that, because I was thinking about that exact same thing. So when Ariana Grande, Jennifer Lopez, and what's his name, Ricky Martin and Bad Bunny spoke out after that, but I'm like,
hell, even Geraldo Rivera was like, "Hey, man, you gotta cut that."
But I'm like, it's not like
He was on a kick.
Trump doesn't have a history of shitting on Puerto Ricans before that and other marginalized people. But because this comedian said this out loud at this particular time, then it's like, oh, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. Bitch, she's been in the running for 70, 80 goddamn days.
Yeah,
8 days before until after this, you want to get involved. You are showing that you are not for all people. You were not standing up after Hurricane Maria. You weren't standing up or speaking out when Trump held back and refused to give the funding that Congress approved.
Billions in aid.
To assist hundreds of billions of dollars, like $450 billion to the fucking island. And you
even worse than not
said nothing. So miss me with that bullshit that I'm not going to pat you on the motherfucking back for saying something 8 days before the election because somebody said out loud. Because if they said it in the background, your ass would not have said shit. Like you have not said shit for the previous fucking 4, 8, 10 goddamn years. Fuck you.
Two things. So yeah, thank you. So not only did Trump he blocked the billions of dollars in aid to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, but he also had his friends start these companies from scratch and then awarded them like these tiny little companies and awarded them hundreds of millions of dollars of government money to go to Puerto Rico and do work that was never done. So basically stole aid
He
from Puerto
wanted
Rico.
to trade Puerto Rico for Greenland.
Yeah, that was insane. But also, like bigger picture, zooming out, this is part of the issue with non-black minorities in America. Like typically they come, I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but typically they come here and they think the way to gain social status and gain privilege in America is to lean in as close to whiteness as possible. Not forgetting that if you allow the people in power and with financial means and resources and access and all of that to continue being racist against black people that you're trying to escape from socially, the racism will eventually come for you. And this is just an example of people waking up and realizing, oh, the racism against me is here. Now it's a problem, when it would never have gotten to this point if people were willing to stand up against the racism against black people specifically. But again, lesson learned for a lot of people. I hope, fingers crossed. Trump doesn't do great with the Latino community.
I'll take it. I'll take those motherfucking votes. I'll take
the votes.
But fuck them still.
I mean, I totally understand you turning your nose up at them. It's understandable. But yeah, I'll take the votes. And typically Trump doesn't do extraordinarily great with the Latino community, but he does get, 34%. I think he's polling at like 35%. If this knocks that number down to the low 30s, he's likely going to lose numerous swing states. So fingers crossed in that regard. Good. But again, as you can see, like when Republicans are like, hey, you can't take a joke, but then you line up clip after clip after clip of not jokes and them just being flat out honest, it's nothing but racism. Like,
and it's funny to me. The only part that's funny is it's the sick irony that they kept saying it was taken out of context, but when we put it, as you said, it's just one after another. So when I stopped to examine, I saw that the context is that they want to make a bunch of racist remarks.
Yeah.
So
there you go. Exactly. And then align that with the fact that Trump wants to basically turn the government into his own personal army, and they want to round up millions of people.
Shirts.
Yeah, and put them in concentration camps, and they wonder why we call them Nazis, and they wonder why. So there was some unfortunate news for the Trump campaign as well today, as we're recording this, is it appears as though, well, one of the October surprises isn't even really a news story per se. It's just a surprise because it's actually just going to suck votes away from Trump, and it's probably going to impact their chances of winning these swing states next week.
Hey, Sandra, this is breaking within the last 5 minutes. The Supreme Court has declined to take RFK Jr.'s name off ballots in Michigan and Wisconsin. This is something that he wanted to do. The Trump campaign probably upset by this, as RFK has pledged his support to Donald Trump, though his name will remain on ballots in Michigan and Wisconsin, meaning people can vote for him even though he's no longer a candidate. Ballots there were already printed, so a loss for RFK Jr. at the Supreme Court 2 times today. And
I held that back the whole video.
So RFK initially entered the 2024 election on the Democratic ticket. We correctly identified him as a Republican in sheep's clothing. He quickly got dispatched by President Biden. No one remembers that, but he had to drop out of the race because he was polling so poor in comparison to Biden that there was no way that he would end up becoming the Democratic nominee. He then moved from the Democratic Party to an independent, and Trump's campaign attempted to get him on the ballots in multiple states, largely swing states, but not enough states in order to actually win enough electoral college votes to win the election. So we knew it was an op in that regard. And also just the fact that, not
It's
only
funny
was he-
that they thought he would siphon all these votes away from Joe Biden, but definitely not going to siphon votes away from Kamala Harris.
yeah,
It's
just-
funny because they wanted him on there for this reason, and he's going to stay on there.
No, but what people
and be the
are
hubris.
What people aren't
the
reporting
finding out
is after he withdrew from the presidential race and after he endorsed, but he petitioned to
after
be
he endorsed
kept
Trump.
on the ballot in Kentucky and said as a presidential candidate. So everything about that motherfucker is just fucking foul and wrong. And the only reason that I can think that Cheryl Hines is all goo-goo-eyed and other than her being a shit person is that he must have a big fucking dick. Because I don't get it.
she probably did. I don't know about hers. The idea of a Kennedy.
Look, we've talked enough about right-wing politicians' dicks over the course of the past few weeks here, including a dead golfer. Like, I'm done. I'm sorry. I'm done in that regard. Like, I don't want to, but
Okay,
yeah,
yes,
so it's
that's-
extraordinarily funny.
No more dick. No.
Not today. Maybe next time. Yeah, it's extraordinarily funny that the Trump campaign thought they were pulling a fast one over Democrats trying to get RFK Jr. on the ballot, and then he was so right wing nut jobby that Republicans started thinking he was extraordinarily popular, and then he drops out, and then they can't get him off the ballot, and he's stealing votes away from Trump. It's incredible. Like, kudos to those guys. Like, brilliant mastermind strategy there to shoot yourself in the face like Stuart Rhodes and again further hampen your prospects of winning the presidential election. I love these dudes. Sometimes the scheme on the surface seems like it's so genius, and then the execution of it is so stupid that they end up killing themselves. And again, that's part of the reason why January 6th failed. It's because we had stupid people in the Republican Party planning this shit. But again, as you've seen, there's a lot of stupid people in the Republican Party to choose from. And so they end up doing this nonsense.
That is true. That is true.
Before we move away from the dicks permanently, there was a clip of JD Vance being extraordinary, seemingly adamant about the fact that he's not gay.
Okay, well, okay. I've actually heard this, and I'm not a gay guy, but I've heard this from gay friends of mine.
Man, damn it, we would have. You want to talk about virality? I'm talking about going viral.
Yeah, that would have made some headlines.
So that is coming from the candidate who we've seen dressed in drag on at least 2 occasions. We've seen the photos, and also who went through multiple name changes in an effort to identify his sexual preference over the course of his lifetime as a young man, thereby.
Well, he's not a gay man. I'm not a gay man.
I'm not a gay guy, but I heard from my gay
I'm
friend.
Pansexual. It sounds like he's pansexual.
He reminds me of the type of dude to being like, "Hey, sucking a dick doesn't make you gay," and I'm like, "Yeah, I guess," but. How many dicks have you sucked is the real question. I don't know. I
am pro sucking dick. I don't shame anybody for that.
I am pro sucking dick as well, especially if you're a woman out there and you're like, that's your favorite thing.
A bitch gotta eat. Okay. I'm just gonna say that.
Hey, look, and given that
what were we talking about?
Well, given the fact that we could potentially be
sucking
living
dick for food.
Well, potentially given the fact that we could be potentially living in an America where abortion is banned, sucking dick, it'll cut down on the need for abortion.
If you want to cut down on abortion, suck dick.
Yeah, that's what Republicans should really be pushing.
Swallow them babies, girl. Do it.
Yeah, no, I mean.
My gag reflex is pretty good, so.
Oversharing. So JD Vance is just extraordinarily, he's just a fucking weirdo, man. Like what kind of vice presidential candidate says stuff like that? It's just incredible. So we also had Steve Bannon being released from his 4-month-long prison sentence for.
Oh, and you said he's 6 months pregnant.
Who is this?
He emerged out of jail 6 months pregnant.
Oh yeah, Steve Bannon looked like he was eating well in jail. So speaking of sucking dick to eat.
Somebody hooked that commissary up.
No, like you said, sucking dick to eat. You got to do what you got to do in there.
Steve, Robbie Roadsteamer here. I'm wondering when's the next insurrection, and can we storm the Burger King after this? Like, can we do that? I mean, doesn't he look great now? We were in Danbury the first month together. He looks great. You don't remember me? We were lifting weights and stuff in the weight room. When's the next insurrection? How are we going to do this and stuff, man? You know what? If I'm leaving, I'm having a good time. He looks like Yoda with AIDS right now. Robbie Roadsteamer, no political violence, people. This place smells like mothballs. Wow, over here, where's the elevator? I'm not even going to get like hors d'oeuvres or something.
So the media showed up in mass. The media showed up in mass for the press or for a press releaser once Steve Bannon was released. And I mean, again, so the event was crashed by this guy on Twitter, Robbie Roadsteamer. I assume he's on TikTok as well. Dude was fucking hilarious. Kudos to him for that video. I mean, that was incredible.
Yeah. I've seen a couple of his videos, and he is.
I gotta admit that might have been the best shit I've seen. Just like generally speaking, of anyone doing anything in person. He's like, "So when are we gonna do our next insurrection?" And then Steve Bannon is like pointing and laughing because it is kind of fucking hilarious. He's like, "Well, actually, now that you mention it, but no, kudos to that guy." But Steve Bannon, fucktard, is probably, as we speak, I would imagine, plotting on how to steal this election in similar fashion.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
As he did in 2020.
Why don't we just go photograph the inside of his cell? I'm sure he wrote it all on the wall.
Okay, so one of the things Trump was saying at the Nazi
rally. You know how to read shit hieroglyphics?
One of the things Trump was saying at the Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden is that he's got a little secret with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
I remember that.
That might help him with the House.
The secret is telling people to vote.
So what I would imagine after the comments from Steve Bannon, rather the comments from Mike Johnson saying that like it's a secret and by definition you're not supposed to tell. What I imagine it is some plot related to how they plan to steal the election that revolves around the possibility that
throwing it to the House.
Yeah. So first off, if Republicans win the House in terms of House majority, Mike Johnson will remain Speaker of the House. That election will be certified, and then Congress will be sworn in on January 3rd. Then the certification for the presidential election takes place on January 6th. And one of the things I imagine that Republicans are plotting is that Mike Johnson will just refuse to convene Congress in order to certify the presidential election, which will thereby throw the vote for president, will throw the Electoral College votes for president out, if Kamala Harris wins, and instead it will be chosen by a state delegation. And how that's done isn't by the House of Representatives, but each state legislature gets a vote, and Republicans control more than a majority and could thereby decide to elect Trump president regardless of whether Kamala Harris won the popular vote or the Electoral College vote. So in regards to, Steve Bannon, I would imagine he is probably plotting numerous alternate paths of stealing the election, as he did in 2020.
Joe Biden not declare martial law and have Mike Johnson arrested and force the next person to do it. I'm serious.
I'm
sorry. Would we just sit there? He's just going to sit there and be like, all right, okay.
Theoretically,
sure.
it is possible because of Republicans' refusal to certify the election in that case for Merrick Garland to order the Department of Justice to sequester Congress.
Is Merrick Garland still alive?
He is still alive.
Proof of life right now.
He's still alive. The Department of Justice sent that. We'll talk about this in just a moment.
He needs to stay alive long enough to resign on January 21st.
I'm
But-
with you,
Kamala
Carol. I know
demands his
where
resignation.
Dee does not agree with us.
So
but
the
yes,
weekend,
I agree
the
with
weekend after Trump, rather the weekend after Elon announced that likely illegal lottery in Pennsylvania, the Department of Justice sent out a letter telling him to cease and desist on Monday. So they're aware of the shit that's going on. I'm sure likely it's all being investigated and charges are coming.
I don't need them to send out a letter. I need them to send out some fucking officers with some goddamn cuffs.
Back to Steve Bannon
it.
here.
Okay,
So back in
continue.
2020, before the election, Steve Bannon was literally telling us what the plan was to no matter what happens in terms of voters voting for president, that Trump was basically going to declare he won anyway, and then they were going to try to steal it through the courts, and then they were going to try and steal it through fake electors. So in all likelihood, I would imagine Steve or Bannon is looped in to whatever the plan is now, and he'll likely immediately get on camera to tell his supporters what the plan is, thereby revealing it to everyone. So just stay tuned for that. I'm sure that's coming pretty soon. And, you know, again, I can understand how you're probably not pleased with Merrick Garland because, you know, Trump's not in prison, even though he largely has nothing to do with that. That was the Supreme Court. But Merrick Garland was the reason Steve Bannon was in prison. So, I mean, like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Don't know what you want him to do here.
All right, I'll give you that.
Fuck a dude up. I want him to fuck someone up.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. I want to see him put them dukes up.
I could deal with like, I don't know. I'm trying to think like we're just gonna let them bulldoze over the election. Nah. I think that's one thing people are forgetting about. They're like, they could do all this stuff. Be like, yeah, but Joe Biden's president. Is he gonna let them? I can't, he's not gonna be like, for the good of the country.
But
I'm just gonna like let whatever the fuck happen.
January the 22nd, the day after Biden was inaugurated.
It's the 20th.
Merrick Garland
Yeah,
should have been on this shit. Period. I feel that way. You're not going to change my mind. You're not going to, no.
Well, I think
no.
there's one thing I could tell you that might possibly change your mind. Merrick Garland wasn't.
But go ahead.
Merrick Garland wasn't confirmed to his position as Attorney General until March of 2021.
Okay, March.
He had 2 months to get his shit together.
Okay, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks after he was appointed Attorney General. He had a secret task force constructed to go after the top of the January 6th election plotters. So, I mean, he did, like, Trump's indicted.
That's the January 6th commission forced his fucking hand. Like, if they
this
not
was
exposed all that they did.
We don't have time to argue about Merrick Garland.
Well, I was just saying.
We're going to disagree.
So, or rather, April of 2021. That was before the January 6th committee was
Stop
even.
it, Carol. I'm already on it, you too.
I was just saying. You know, like the committee didn't do any public hearings for months.
Bless you.
Bless you. Yeah.
That was the cutest sneeze ever.
That's quite adorable.